A lone penguin waddled along a deserted strip of beach just before sunrise. The sky was painted in sherbet shades of pink and orange, but the heat of the coming day was already pressing down like a thick quilt. The penguin named Pablo squinted his beady eyes and surveyed his surroundings. He traveled many miles from the frosty south to arrive here, guided by curiosity rather than common sense. After all, what was a penguin like Pablo doing in a place where the temperature soared well above anything he'd ever experienced? He'd asked himself this question repeatedly, but his adventurous spirit wouldn't let him turn back. He was determined to see the famous tropical resort that tourists raved about in postcards and brochures he'd occasionally found washed up on his icy shores. As he edged closer, Pablo's heart pounded with anticipation. Towering palm trees swayed gently in the breeze. Lavish bungalows overlooked the sea, and staff members bustled around in brightly colored polos, preparing for the day's carnival of tourists. He was hungry, hot, and entirely out of his natural habitat. Still, he was here and ready for the challenge. A small sign by the resort's entrance read, "Welcome to Paradise," in curly script. A message usually aimed at paying guests, not sneaky emperor penguins. Yet Pablo took it as a personal invitation. Nobody was around to ask for credentials or ID, so he pressed his waddling feet into the sand and marched right in. The thick, humid air hit him like a warm, damp towel. But he had made it. This was paradise, according to the brochure, and paradise was definitely worth exploring. The first thing he noticed inside the resort was how many humans were milling about, sipping coconut drinks, flipping through magazines, or chatting cheerfully while rocking in hammocks. The vibrant floral patterns on every shirt nearly blinded him. Apparently, bright colors were fashionable in this part of the world. Pablo surmised that if he wore something equally flashy, he might blend in. Of course, he had no clothing beyond his natural tuxedo. He glanced down ruefully at his sleek black and white feathers and sighed. Perhaps humans would think he was a short guest in a very formal suit one who happened to walk with a waddle. Wasting no time, Pablo waddled toward the pool area, which seemed central to all the fun. Umbrellas dotted the perimeter, and neon floaties drifted lazily across the crystal water. A lifeguard dozed in a tall wooden chair, sunglasses perched precariously on his nose. Pablo quickly slid behind a large flock of sunbathers, trying to stay out of sight. One older woman with a wide-brimmed hat and a book nearly saw him, but a passing waiter distractingly offered her a fruit smoothie, allowing him time to shuffle on. He scanned the area, searching for signs that would lead him to some cool relief. He desperately needed ice. His own personal igloo would have been heaven. He thought he spotted a snack bar. The sign above it displayed pictures of delicious frozen treats, popsicles shaped like palm trees, colorful slushies, and towering ice cream cones that sparkled like diamonds to his overheated eyes. If he could just get one, or maybe 6. Trying to appear casual, he made his way over. The server stationed there was a tall man wearing a shirt festooned with cartoon watermelons. He whistled a chipper tune while stacking plastic cups. The line was short, but it was impossible for Pablo to stand among the humans unnoticed. He crouched beneath a neighboring table, waiting for the right moment to approach the counter. When the last guest in line walked away with a swirl of shaved ice, Pablo seized the chance. He hopped up, placed his flippers on the counter with the best attempt at a human posture he could manage, and opened his beak. No words came out, of course, although he tried to squawk out something that might pass for "one popsicle, please." The server stopped whistling, blinked once, and stared. Pablo's heart hammered. Was he about to be discovered? For 1/10 second, the man's eyebrows shot up to his hairline. But the resort staff were trained not to judge any eccentricities in their clientele. The man shrugged, scooped shaved ice into a cup, and slid it toward Pablo. With a grateful bow, Pablo scooped it up in his flippers and slurped greedily. It was glorious, the first wave of frozen sugar that graced his beak, washing away the oppressive heat, if only for a moment. Empowered by this small victory, Pablo retreated behind a bush to savor his cool treat. He let the ice melt slowly on his tongue, each drip bringing a tiny bit of relief. His new plan was to stay hidden by day, sneak out for frozen goodies or a dip in the resort's fountain at night, and generally keep a low profile. If he played his cards right, he could experience the joy of the tropics without giving himself severe heat exhaustion. But he also couldn't resist exploring more. The lure of hot tubs, water slides, and beach volleyball courts made his heart flutter with curiosity. Then there was the grand ballroom, which he'd heard hosted lavish luau parties in the evening. The place was rumored to have special effects, including artificial snow machines. That was a rumor he intended to verify. No sooner had he finished his shaved ice than he heard a shriek. "A penguin!" He whipped his head around. A young boy in neon swim trunks was pointing directly at him, eyes wide with wonder. Pablo froze. Busted! Within seconds, the boy's parents appeared, cameras at the ready. Several other guests craned their necks, drawn by the excitement. This was not good. If he became a spectacle, the resort's management would surely investigate, and he'd be escorted out, or worse, sent back to the frozen south on the next cargo plane. He had to act quickly. Pablo took a deep breath, puffed out his chest, and gave the family a polite squawk. Then he waddled off, letting the crowd's curiosity trail behind him, snapping pictures and squeals of delight lighting up the path. He thought he could lose them by heading to the back of the resort, where clusters of tiki statues and a maze of bamboo screens might provide cover. Each hop and shuffle made him sweat profusely beneath his feathers, but adrenaline fueled him forward. He slid between a pair of lounge chairs and scurried behind a decorative stone fountain shaped like a giant conch. At the far corner, he spotted an entrance to what appeared to be the staff area. Deciding it was safer to hide among employees than incur the prying eyes of tourists, he slipped inside through a propped-open door. The staff corridor was a stark contrast to the lush exterior. Stark fluorescent lights flickered overhead, and the hallway smelled faintly of cleaning products and stale coffee. Metal lockers lined the walls, each plastered with stickers or magnets. Pablo heard voices around the corner and rushed to hide behind a rolling cart full of clean linens. The squeaking of the cartwheels nearly gave him a heart attack. Soon, two housekeepers, both wearing matching polos, came around the corner chatting in hushed tones about the day's fiascos. One woman complained about an entire wedding party tracking sand into the lobby. The other shrugged, rolling her eyes, as if to say, just another day in paradise. Once they disappeared, Pablo peeked out from behind the white towels. He needed a plan to blend in better. He spied a row of lost and found bins near the lockers. Seizing his moment, he waddled over to rummage through them. Inside he found a straw hat, a pair of tiny sunglasses, and a somewhat tacky floral shirt that looked like it might fit, well, as much as anything could fit, a penguin. Feeling bold, he slipped the shirt over his flippers, perched the sunglasses on the tip of his beak, and jammed the hat on top of his head. He waddled toward a full-length mirror at the end of the corridor. The sight was surreal. A penguin in a Hawaiian shirt, straw hat, and shades. If not for the black and white feathers, he almost looked like an eccentric tourist. Pablo decided to stay in his new outfit, believing perhaps it would reduce the stares. Clinging to a shred of optimism, he re-entered the main resort area. The midday sun was now scorching, but a mild ocean breeze helped. He ambled toward a shaded lounge chair near the pool, determined to fake it until he made it. He carefully lowered himself onto the chair, clutching a folded beach towel to dab at his brow. Nobody seemed to notice him, at least not immediately. Some guests even nodded politely, as if greeting a fellow traveler who had just come from the fireworks stand of tropical fashion. A cheerful activity coordinator strolled by, tapping on a clipboard. She wore a bright whistle around her neck, and her name tag read Lola. When she noticed Pablo, she paused. Her expression transformed from cheerful to slightly perplexed. "Hello there," she said slowly, as if speaking to someone from another dimension. "Are you enjoying your stay?" Pablo responded with a short chirp, bobbing his head in what he hoped was a universal gesture for, "Yes, everything's great, thanks for asking." Lola cocked her head but maintained her smile. "Wonderful," she replied, then turned to blow her whistle toward the pool. "Water aerobics in 5 minutes, everyone." Curiosity spiked in Pablo's tiny heart. Water aerobics sounded kind of fun. He hadn't had a proper swim since he'd arrived beyond that meltdown dash, in search of ice, and the water was calling to him. Sparkling, beckoning, cool enough to soothe his overheated body. He mustered his courage and waddled over to the pool's edge, ignoring the alarmed glances of a few sun-kissed guests. A group wearing polka-dot swimsuits and silly inflatable armbands was already lined up, waiting for Lola's instructions. Pablo stood among them, squeaking and greeting, though his voice sounded more like a squeal of excitement. Before anyone could protest, Lola started the routine, shouting instructions as she performed exaggerated arm movements. Soon, Pablo was fully immersed both in the water and the workout. The relief was immediate. He flapped his flippers joyously, cooling off in tandem with the others' moves. The comedic sight of a penguin in a Hawaiian shirt doing water aerobics generated giggles and even applause from onlookers. An unbridled sense of triumph fluttered in Pablo's chest. Everyone seemed to accept him as a bizarre but harmless addition to the resort's vibe. After the session, he hopped out, feeling like a brand new bird. He even politely refused the little girl's attempt to feed him fish crackers. He had to watch his figure, after all, and also remain somewhat incognito. However, not everyone found Pablo's presence endearing. From the second-floor balcony, the resort's manager, a prim man named Mr. Winston, watched with disapproving eyes. He wore a pressed white suit and a frown that looked so permanent it might as well have been carved into his face. Pablo's beach attire and happy-go-lucky attitude made Mr. Winston's eyebrow twitch. This was, after all, an exclusive getaway for human guests. Animals, especially those not in the official resort brochure, posed a threat to the image of a pristine tropical destination. Mr. Winston twirled his mustache, simmering with annoyance. He didn't want a media fiasco if guests started tweeting about renegade penguins. He resolved to find this creature and remove it, for good. As the afternoon lengthened, Pablo strolled around, sampling every blissful corner of the resort. He discovered a hidden garden with koi ponds, a hammock area near a gentle waterfall, and a miniature golf course bright with pastel windmills. At one hole, shaped like a tiny volcano, Pablo tried to use his flippers to putt a golf ball, which mostly resulted in comedic misses. Children cheered him on, giggling as his ball veered off course and into a patch of thick shrubs. Later, fueled by determination, he managed a hole-in-one at the final windmill hole, prompting applause and astonished gasps from all who witnessed the improbable shot. Between these escapades, he snuck into the air-conditioned hallways whenever the heat became too daunting. He made liberal use of the ice machine near the elevators, filling cups and stuffing them under his shirt for temporary relief. One time, he got stuck in the elevator with a boisterous family of 5. The mother complimented his costume, assuming he was some promotional performer. Pablo gave a polite squawk, furiously pressing the door open button to make his escape, but by that point he was starting to see that blending in, while occasionally thrilling, was exhausting. The tropical heat was unrelenting, and the possibility of being discovered by the stern-looking manager lurked like a hawk overhead. Nightfall brought a different vibe to the resort. Tiki torches lined the paths and excitement buzzed in the air for the evening luau. A stage stood in the courtyard with large, colorful banners waving overhead. The guests formed a ring around the stage to watch dancers perform mesmerizing routines with fire and rhythmic drumming. Pablo huddled off to the side, enthralled by the vibrant energy. The humidity felt slightly less oppressive in the cooler evening, allowing him to relax. He noticed that some of the staff he'd seen earlier in the day were now performing, dressed in traditional costumes, swirling flaming batons. Even Lola hopped on stage to lead a lively dance number that included playful conga lines and comedic hula hoop tossing. After the main show, a DJ took over, spinning upbeat music that made everyone want to move. Pablo, too excited to feel self-conscious, hopped onto the makeshift dance floor. He waddled to the rhythm, his flippers waving above his head like an eager fan in a stadium. The crowd welcomed him like a mascot, cheering him on. Children squealed with delight, adults laughed in surprise, and cameras flashed to capture the sight of a dancing penguin in tropical attire. For a moment, Pablo forgot the heat, forgot that he was an out-of-place bird in a human playground. He just embraced the joy of the moment. But all good things must come to an end. Near the edge of the crowd, looming like a thundercloud, Mr. Winston appeared, flanked by two burly security guards. Pablo's heart sank. He'd been foolish to think he could frolic among the guests undiscovered. The manager pointed an accusing finger, barking instructions at the guards. The laughter and music faded in Pablo's ears, replaced by the pounding of his own heartbeat. He knew he had to flee. With what could only be described as a mixture of grace and panic, he hopped off the dance floor, waddled past stunned onlookers, and darted behind the tiki bar. One of the guards lunged, nearly grabbing his tail feathers, but Pablo managed to wriggle free. Slipping between tiki torches, Pablo scrambled along the resort's perimeter, stumbling over decorative shells and nearly tripping on a stray pool noodle. The chase was on, and Mr. Winston was leaving no stone unturned. Pablo heard the manager shouting about how they couldn't allow a wild animal to roam freely. Pablo's mind whirled. If they caught him, his tropical adventure would be over. The very thought of leaving behind the shaved ice and cheesy dance parties made him want to squawk in protest. He scurried behind a row of palm trees, searching frantically for an escape route. Then he saw it. An ice machine near a staff entrance. It was a long shot, but maybe he could slip in there, cool down, and find a path back to the ocean. He sprinted forward, flippers pumping, the guards hot on his trail. In a comedic twist, an enthusiastic group of resort guests decided to help him. A young couple, possibly fueled by too many tropical cocktails, blocked the guard's path, pretending to pose for a photo. Another woman accidentally spilled her pineapple drink in the guard's way, causing them to slip. Through these helpful distractions, Pablo gained precious seconds. He hopped onto the ice machine, yanked open the metal flap, and dove inside. A blast of icy cold greeted him. He burrowed deeper among the cubes, letting out a silent sigh of relief as he listened to the sounds of footsteps rushing past. Minutes stretched by. Pablo stayed perfectly still, his heart finally slowing to a steady thump. After the commotion outside subsided, he peeked his head out. No sign of the manager. Without waiting for a better moment, he slipped out of the machine, leaving a trail of half-melted ice behind. Carefully, he pushed open the staff entrance. The corridor was clear. He remembered passing an exit leading to the beach at the far end of this hallway. If he could get there, he could vanish into the night and continue living on the outskirts of the resort if he wanted, or maybe realized it was time to head back home to cooler climates. But even though the chase had rattled him, Pablo felt an odd pang of sadness at the thought of leaving. He had come so far, and despite the difficulties, he'd had the time of his life. The memory of that little girl offering him fish crackers made him chuckle inwardly. The dancing, the shaved ice, the water aerobics, they were experiences he wouldn't trade for the world. Perhaps he could find a way to make a proper exit, one that wouldn't end with him dragged out by security. Still hidden in the corridor, he spotted a large poster on the wall, advertising Winter Wonderland Night Special, Snow Show. The tagline promised artificially created snow, an extravagant display that the resort hosted once a year. Pablo's eyes lit up. This was his chance to see something that reminded him of home. If he could only hold out until the show started, maybe he could indulge in a final moment of frosty bliss before leaving for good. It was scheduled for midnight, a mere hour away. Pablo resolved to wait. He tiptoed into the nearest supply closet, shutting the door quietly behind him. He would rest, bide his time, and slip into the winter wonderland events unseen. As the midnight hour approached, muted drum beats and excited chatter drifted through the closet's thin walls. Pablo strained to hear the announcements. When the time was right, he gently cracked the door open to see if the coast was clear. Guests were streaming toward the ballroom, eagerly anticipating the snow-themed extravaganza. Staff members wore snowflake-printed outfits and giant fans were set up on either side of the stage. Once the lights dimmed, a hush fell over the crowd, broken only by a soft melody filtering through speakers. Then, with a triumphant surge, bursts of artificial snow shot from cannons, swirling around in a graceful dance of glistening white. Gasps of delight filled the air. Pablo edged into the ballroom, careful to stay behind a group of tall tourists. The sudden chill from the snow machines was like a balm on his overheated feathers. Flakes of fake snow drifted onto his hat, dusting it in a shimmering layer. It wasn't real ice, but oh, how it reminded him of home. Emotion swelled in his chest, joy, nostalgia, a tinge of homesickness. Guests frolicked in the manufactured flurries, building tiny snow piles or tossing the light flakes into the air. Children squealed and grown-ups laughed at the novelty. In that moment, Pablo felt an overwhelming sense of contentment. He closed his eyes, letting the gentle flakes coat his feathers. Suddenly a hush swept through the ballroom. The crowd parted like curtains. Mr. Winston stood in the center, flanked by security. They had spotted him. The manager's eyes were locked onto Pablo with steely resolve. Pablo gulped, but realized, perhaps foolishly, that he wasn't afraid anymore. Somehow, seeing the snow, experiencing the warmth of human laughter mixed with this fleeting winter enchantment, had given him courage. He waddled forward, face to face with the manager. Gasps rippled through the ballroom, everyone wondering what would happen next. For a moment, no one dared to move. The artificial snow gave the scene an ethereal glow. Then, as if on cue, the DJ played a lighthearted track, and the crowd began to chant, "Let him stay! Let him stay!" Children jumped up and down, shouting for the penguin, who had become the unofficial mascot of their vacation. Even some staff members joined in, remembering Pablo's comedic attempts at water aerobics and that improbable hole-in-one. Pablo looked up at Mr. Winston, trying to convey with his watery eyes how grateful he was for every moment here. Still, he braced himself for rejection. Yet the manager hesitated. He gazed around at the faces of delighted guests. He took in the artificial snow that had transformed the ballroom into a dreamscape, the swirling lights casting playful patterns on the gold-flecked tiles. Then he looked down at the penguin in the Hawaiian shirt, straw hat slightly askew, plastic sunglasses perched askance on his beak. If there was a time to embrace the resort's motto, "Welcome to Paradise," it was now. With a long sigh, he nodded. A wave of cheers erupted, fireworks of joy bursting in every corner of the ballroom. Mr. Winston cleared his throat and said, "All right, he can stay for the night." The applause doubled in volume. Pablo broke into a triumphant squawk, bouncing happily in the flurries. Snow swirled, confetti popped, drinks clinked, and for a heartwarming moment, everyone celebrated life's simple wonders. The celebration continued long after midnight. Pablo danced with children, posed for pictures, and nibbled at tiny fish-shaped canapés, which were suspiciously better than the fish crackers. Staff members laughed about how the resort had truly become a paradise for all. Mr. Winston, though still stiff, allowed a faint smile to crinkle the corners of his mouth. The night glowed with a certain magic that only comes from the blending of worlds north and south, human and penguin, tropical heat and man-made snow. By the time the festivities wound down, Pablo was thoroughly exhausted. He found a quiet corner near a decorative igloo prop, curled up on a soft cushion, and drifted into the sweetest slumber he'd ever known. In the morning's gentle dawn, the resort still appeared to shimmer in the afterglow of the night's revelry. With renewed energy, Pablo waddled out to the shore where he had first arrived. A breeze rustled the palm fronds and the surf lapped lazily at the sand. He knew it was time to return to his cold homeland. He gazed back at the resort, half expecting to see Mr. Winston or a security guard trailing him. Instead, he saw Lola, the activity coordinator, waving from the distance, a small group of guests by her side. They waved too, encouraging him on his journey. Pablo slipped off the Hawaiian shirt, hat, and sunglasses, leaving them carefully folded on a lounge chair as a final thank you gift, or maybe just proof that his visit wasn't a fever dream. The rising sun warmed his back, but the promise of cooler waters beckoned him. With one last glance at the place that had given him so many wild memories, he dove into the ocean. Each stroke propelled him further from the beach and deeper into his own adventure. The tropical resort eventually shrank to a colorful blur along the horizon. He wasn't sure if he'd ever return, but he swam with a heart full of gratitude, and maybe a little bit of shaved ice still lingering in his dreams. Knowing that in one corner of the tropics, a penguin had made paradise just a bit cooler.